Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in Data Kagurabachi, chapter number 82. This chapter is titled Inten vs. Tobimune. And let me just go and put it out there to the world. This was a very cool way to give us this chapter title this week. I mean, we get the whole build up throughout this chapter about Samura, Chihiro, all of these sort of, I'm going to say Uruha flashback, even though it's not really a oh yes, this is Uruha's past. It's more of one of those hey guys, this is what happened in the brief moments that we've seen between chapter number 58 and of course now into 82, and all sort of the moments going on why Uruha's alive and all that various stuff. But of course the really cool moment is hey guys, the end of this chapter seems like we're going to be seemingly staying with both Chihiro and Samura as we are going through the whole idea of hey, it's Inten versus Tobimune, which really leads me to believe that at every single point in the series of Kagurabachi, we're going to get the moment of hey, Inten versus the Magatsumi or Shinichi, whatever they call it then, or hey, Inten versus Kumeyuri, which I'm honestly surprised we have not had that already, even though the moment where it's hey, Hirohiko had the Kumeyuri doing all that stuff, it was really more of a different sort of beast going on there. And of course we know Subaru and the other wielders and Chain Blades out there, so the whole idea is hey, at some point it seems like everybody is going to be losing their blades, going to be put in the hand of an enemy, or at least an antagonist of the Kagurabachi series, and Chihiro is going to have to go through and be hey, Samura, or hey, Sojo, or whoever you are wielding this thing, I am pretty much telling you, no, you cannot use that sword anymore, it's my father's property, and all that various stuff, and a showdown will be happening between all of these various characters, which honestly, absolutely here for. What can I say? But this is honestly a very alright chapter of Kagurabachi. I did like it. I thought it was very good. But it really didn't have me as hyped up as some of these previous chapters that have pretty much gotten me hyped up, told you of hey, Hakure's running around on his own, Kudo's helping him about, Uruha is, oh man, he's back all of a sudden, after Hakure has this whole moment of, gosh, am I really good enough for all of this stuff? Not to say this was a bad chapter by any means. I really enjoyed it, don't get me wrong, and we still have yet to talk about all of the, what do we have, 19 pages this week? Yeah, 19 pages. But yeah, really, without any further ado, I just want to go and hop in and talk about this good old chapter of Kagurabachi. But of course, before we can do that, we need to talk about what happened last time in the Kagurabachi series. And as I alluded to, we had this whole chapter where Hakure was running through all of the various area of the Kabunaki headquarters, trying to make his way to the Shinichi and Chain of Blade, along with the Sword Saint, to pretty much use his storehouse ability and put away the Shinichi into some other position, pretty much, right? And the whole idea is they're all running around as Hakure's getting attacked by all of these, oh no, it's every 1 in 10 person here, or was it 1 in 10 or 1 in 5? I think it was 1 in 10 if I'm not mistaken. Every 1 of 10 people here in the Kabunagi headquarters are actually traitors, and it seems like we also have some other sorcerers that were working with the Kabunaki who are also part of the Hishaku's minions right now, and all this various stuff. We saw this girl with sort of these long arms, had a ponytail, and of course she wielded these knives that were staked into her arms pretty much, along with some transformation sorcery guy. And the whole idea is oh no, it seems like Kudo is dead. We see that Kashima, who is supposedly one of Kudo's right-hand men, pretty much tells this fake Kudo to stay in his ground, letting Hakure get away. But as Hakure's running away, it isn't looking good for him. Uruha appears and it's oh my gosh, Uruha's back, that's absolutely insane. And from that moment, we sort of just see, Uruha tell Hakure, hey man, we gotta go get going, I'll be here to protect you. And Hakure's Uruha, you're here! And of course, he's feeling so good, being that he has felt a lot of guilt, being oh no, it seems like I was the one who killed Uruha all that time ago by not summoning his blade, and instead summoning Tobimune, right? But of course, we start off this chapter of Kagurabachi, again, chapter number 82, titled Inten versus Tobimune, at, of course, the Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel, where we see a moment where, of course, Samura was just holding the Kumeyuri blade after picking it up off the ground and having this little bit of a conversation with Chihiro. And we honestly just start off with Chihiro sort of standing here. It is this panel, I think, that Hokuzono has used before in, what was that, chapter number 80, or not 80, 77 or 76? No, it was either 77 or 78. Whenever we cut over to the Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel and all this stuff, and Hakure's back up and ready to get rumbling and all that various stuff, right? But we start off with Chihiro just being hey, all of this time I wanted to believe it, but I couldn't be sure. As we see it, of course, Samura was getting up, holding the Kumeyuri in his arms, getting ready to do all this various stuff. And we see that Rose sort of like jumps up, moves over, and grabs the blade out of his hand. He just is like, oh man, that was close. He was like, hey, this is a Kumeyuri, but where is Hirohiko? And Samura just says like, hey, he retreated. He is still contracted to the blade though. The sheath fell down, so it should be 2 floors below where we currently are pretty much, right? And Samura pretty much just says all this stuff to Ro, and I'm guessing that being that we don't really see Ro for the rest of this chapter, I'm guessing that Ro sort of like goes down to retrieve the sheath and all of that various stuff of the Kumeyuri. But we sort of see that Chihiro is standing back here, looking at Samura this entire second, just saying like, oh man, Mr. Samura has advanced even further in the past 18 years. In that battle just now, I sensed his revival sorcery. It was an intentional exercise, pretty much, right? It's like, hey, why did he hone the ability to kill somebody and revive them, right? As, of course, Chihiro thinks back to a little bit ago where he's like, hey, to that end, you're willing to let all the sword bearers die, and Samura's like, hey, it's necessary to stop the malediction, pretty much, right? As Chihiro just thinks like, okay, so we know that Samura's only motive is to stop the malediction. He bears no malice towards any of the other sword bearers, right? And as all this is happening, Chihiro eventually just says like, hey, Mr. Samura, Mr. Uruha is still alive, isn't he? And we see a little bit of a small panel where Ro is just sort of like looking like, huh, like what is he talking about? And we just see Samura, of course, these scars, like the sort of like healed skin of the scars around his eyes. I mean, the scars are still obviously there, but like it looks like just like the skin is a bit more healthier than like the degrading it was sort of before. But we see that Samura just has his eyes closed, sort of alludes to confirming what Chihiro has said here, right? As we get a lot of narration here for the next little bit, as we go into a little bit of a flashback, right? Pretty much saying like, hey, the malediction is the true realm of the Shinichi. It has claimed countless lives. And the only way to make sure it never happens again is to execute the Swordmaster. But if the Swordmaster dies, the Eternal Contracts dictate that all the other sword bearers die too. They refrain from killing the Swordmaster to spare our lives, but they keep the Shinichi sealed up to minimize the risk of another malediction. Minimize even still, he had to constantly live with that guilt that the malediction could strike again. As we get a little bit of a shot of Uruha's face on an operating table somewhere, right? As we also cut over to the Senkutsuji Temple again, where we see that, of course, Samura and Uruha were sort of sitting in those rooms, and we sort of see that Samura's like, hey, I'm going to kill all the sword bearers, pretty much, right? And Uruha's like, hey, but, like, what are you saying? As we even see this narration is coming from Uruha's perspective, as Uruha just says, like, hey, but I thought my time was finally up, pretty much, right? And we see that Uruha says out loud, like, hey, he allowed me to live just a little bit longer, and that's why I can't throw away that gift, pretty much, right? And we see that Samura's like, hey, don't worry, and Uruha's like, what do you mean? And Samura just says, like, hey, the only one about to die is the hero version of you. As, of course, all of the various areas of the Senkutsuji Temple are starting to collapse and all of the big effects and all of that various stuff, right? And we pretty much see that Uruha and Samura get ready, sort of like holding both their swords in that sort of dual style. And hey, Uruha loses, Samura comes through and cuts him on the shoulder, of course, right? And Samura just is like, hey, well, it's just about all of our egos. The only thing left is to fight to the death, pretty much. And we see that battle ensue. And, of course, we see the tree with, of course, the 7-pointed leaf falling down from the tree, pretty much, right? And we see that as Uruha is laying on the ground, of course, this massive wound over and up on him. Of course, Samura wasn't using the Tobimune blade whenever they fought, right? So we see that he walks over, grabs Tobimune, unsheathes it, sticks it down into Uruha, and uses the power of the Phoenix, Suzaku, and slowly revives him, pretty much, right? And Uruha's like, hey, don't tell me. He just says, like, hey, Samura, do you intend to shoulder it alone? As we see that, all of a sudden, Uruha wakes up on an operating table, right? And we see there are 2 doctors here, of course, in all of their, like, medical masks, and all of their hair is, like, tied up into those hairnets, pretty much. And Uruha wakes up, and we see these 2 guys, like, whoa, oh my gosh, like, hey, wow, what? Did this guy just, like, wake up? Like, what's going on here, right? As Uruha just thinks, like, hey, from what these 2 tell me, at one point, I was clearly dead. But my eternal contract was severed. And Uruha just thinks like, okay, that makes sense. So this was his goal. And I really love the freak out that we get from both the two medical professionals. They're just like, oh my gosh, like, he came back to life, like, it's a miracle, right? And they're like, no, it's actually like a phoenix, da 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 da. Of course, like, the whole fun wordplay of, we know what's going on here, these two guys don't, right? It's actually pretty funny, right? But the whole idea is Samura just saying, like, no, that's not it. It was the idea of a phoenix. It was Suzaku, right? All he did was implant flames of mercy into my body so that they would activate after my death. Like, hey, I get it in principle. But sorcery activated by a person's death isn't unheard of. But a revival, he clearly didn't have that power 18 years ago. I don't know if he did it, but Mr. Samura cultivated that ability to release us sword bearers from our eternal contracts. But there are limitations to this kind of sorcery. Even with the spell implanted, if the sorcerer dies, the spell dies too. So it wouldn't work if Samura implanted it on himself, pretty much, right? As we also get this whole idea of looking over to of course, the Pine Tree Hatshaku member, right? And I sort of like how we get this whole idea of, hey, if he plants seeds into everybody's body, of course, they'll sprout whenever they die. Of course, that's the whole idea of, like, we know about this sorcery sprouting from death, and the whole idea of, like, hey, we see what's happening currently at the Kabunagi headquarters. But also this whole idea is that if the Hatshaku member put the Pine Tree sorcery into his own body, and then he died, the spell would die along with him. Presumably also meaning that if they were to kill the Hatshaku right now, all of these people in the Kabunagi headquarters would be saved, and I think that's pretty interesting, right? But the whole idea is just like, hey, in other words, the tactic of severing the only eternal contract could be applied to Mr. Samura himself, and Samura must know that. As of course, we have to understand this whole thing of Samura saying like, hey, nobody else has to join me, this is something I do on my own and all that various stuff, and we see that laying down on the operating table, Uruha's like, oh no, he intends to die alone. As Uruha just thinks like, hey, he intends to do away with all the eternal contracts, the Swordmaster, and the risk of another malediction. All of it alone. And we see that, of course, way back in the day, we see that a young Uruha and a young Samura are sort of like out there training together. And I really love the image that we get of Samura here in the background, because it really looks like Samura is wearing those really baggy pants and also a black long sleeve shirt, which really reminds me of the whole like Toji and Gojo during the Sukuna battle appearance that we get in Jujutsu Kaisen, which I honestly think is really funny, right? But we see that Uruha definitely isn't the type of person he is now with the sword. He's saying like, hey, I've been chasing after you all this time. Only I pursued you relentlessly in this whole idea of like, hey, I am one of the few people who knows about the EI White Purity style and who can almost perfectly use it pretty much, right? As he's just like, only I alone. And we see that Uruha tries to move in the hospital bed, right? But he's like, oh gosh, like, I can't move, like what's going on here, right? And we see that one of the medical professionals just says like, hey, with your eternal contract broken, your whole nervous system is trying to slowly regenerate after being destroyed for 18 years. And hey, it'll probably take a few days, which is very interesting because like, okay, this also gives us the whole idea of that, hey, Samura can't go and just automatically release these people from their eternal contracts and then just expect them to fight and get up again, right? Because of course we have this whole idea like, hey, Samura cannot die in the battle that him and Chihiro are about to have, because of course he has to be able to save Subaru and of course the other wielder of the Enchanted Blades, and then he can sort of pass on peacefully while doing all this other stuff, right? But it's just a very interesting phrasing to it, and the whole idea of like, hey, after 18 years, your nervous system was pretty much connected to this blade, and now that it's no longer there, your body does not know how to act. I think that's a very interesting way to put it, pretty much, right? But then we pretty much see that Uruha's like, hey, but then, like, who will stop Mr. Samura? And the medical professional just is like, hey, I hear that currently Chihiro Rokuhira joined the Counter Samura force. And guys, this isn't good. We know what happens to forces in Kagurabachi. The anti-Cloud Gouger special forces, the counter Inten special forces, the counter, what was it? The counter Uruha, or the elite steam squad, or whatever the people who were protecting Uruha were called. Like, yeah, we all know how they all turned out, and yes, we all know it was not good, pretty much, right? Hey, I really hope that this doesn't mean a bad thing happening to Chihiro, or maybe this is just breaking the mold. Who really knows, right? But the whole idea is Uruha just says, like, hey, whatever you guys do, though, don't report me to the higher-ups. There's no harm in having a secret ace up our sleeves, pretty much, right? As we cut back to the present, where we see that Uruha and, of course, Hakuri are currently dueling all of these two other sorcerers. And we see the transformation guy just is like, oh no, hey Uruha, you're supposed to be dead. And Uruha here in a moment is like standing here triumphantly with, of course, Hakuri on the ground behind him. And hey, Uruha just says like, hey, I mean, I lost. At least let me protect this place while they are away. As he pretty much just thinks to Chihiro and just says like, hey, I have faith in them. We then cut over to the Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel once more, but of course, where Samura is staying with Chihiro right beside him, pretty much, right? And of course, this is like right after the moment where Chihiro just asked about Uruha, and Samura just says like, oh, hey, so what if Uruha is alive? And Chihira's like, hey, do you really intend to die alone? And Samura's like, oh yes, more than anything. The possibility that the malediction and the power of the enchanted blades will wreak havoc in the future is my greatest fear. As we see a panel of course, Samura's daughter, Iori, with a flower blooming out of her eye and flowers consuming her entire body. Of course, the one thing that Samura does care about the most, his daughter, he doesn't want her to have to deal with the malediction, so he's trying to stop that whole idea before Iori may get hurt. And it's honestly a very, like, shocking panel that we get here, just like seeing the flower blooming out of Iori's face, right? But Samura just is like, hey, I know that you feel the same, you don't need to stop me at all, I'll kill the sword master, right? And Chihira's like, hey, I mean, I do feel the same a little bit about that. He says like, hey, but even in your darkest despair, I want to save other people's lives. Like, you fought tirelessly for that, right? Chihira's like, hey, I am the same as you, Samura. I'm willing to fight tirelessly to save your life. And Samura's like, hey, that won't stop the malediction, though, right? As we see that they both get forward, clashing their two blades on each other, pretty much, and they both jump back, spring back into all of these actions and effects, pretty much, right? And Chihira's like, hey, we'll find another way, I'll fight alongside of you, Samura. Samura's like, no, that's just impossible. And we see that as they sort of let go of their swords and jump back, we see that Chihiro flew back into one of the various rooms of the Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel, and Samura went out and appeared in the hallway, pretty much, right? And we see the door sort of close here in the moment as Samura goes through and actively slams it. And Chihiro is stuck just standing in this room, and he goes up and looks, and of course we get a good look at the peephole of the door once again. And we see that Chihiro goes up and looks through it, where we see that Samura is standing there, hand on the reverse grip of Tobimune, sticking out his finger, of course charging up all of his energy into Tobimune, and of course, the EI White Purity style, right? As we just get a little bit more narration saying like, hey, the White Purity style entails building up spirit energy to generate an explosive force. He prepares to take out Chihiro in a single blow, a blow imbued with the flames of Suzaku. As we also see, Chihiro just thinks like, hey, that's right, the last time we faced off, I didn't even slow him down. Nothing I say now will be convincing. As we just see spirit bubbles of water start to like blow up around Chihiro, as we see that Chihiro also gets his hand on the Enchanted Blade of Inten and gets ready to charge up the EI White Purity Styles. He just thinks like, hey, I have to charge this with everything I've got. As he just looks at the door and just thinks like, hey, through that door, he's not determined to let me read his stance until the last minute. And she was like, hey, if I move, he'll locate me by sound. I'll stand my ground. As we see that Chihiro's just standing here on his tippy toes, pretty much holding Inten, and we see that Chihiro just does a little bit of a gulp. He's like, as all of a sudden, Samura hears this, and of course, he opens up the Tobimune, comes through, and slashes at Chihiro. As we just see the amount of like wind pressure and force this builds up makes Chihiro's cape blow in the wind, all the furniture in this room, even the windows shatter behind Chihiro, as he just thinks like, hey, I don't care if I go to hell. And as we cut to page, we see both Chihiro and Samura outside, as we see they both have their sword hilts right next to each other, the blades are clinging on each other, and we just see a mix of water droplets and crow feathers emanating from behind the two of them. As pretty much Chihiro just says like, hey, I'll show you here and now. And of course, this is where we get the chapter title, chapter number 82, Inten versus Tobimune. And that's where we end off this chapter of Kagurabachi. And like I said earlier, this chapter isn't going to go down into books as my favorite chapter of Kagurabachi ever. I think this was a good chapter. I mean, absolutely, how could I not? But I honestly have started to find myself looking at the problem of I honestly just don't care about Chihiro enough. Like, I know this is just, like, really weird to say, but, like, ever since we've had this whole idea of, like, Chihiro becoming more of this character, where he's slowing down, he's taking a look at all of this stuff, he's being way more quiet and way more reserved about all the actions he's taking, I've really found it a lot harder to actively sit down and be, like, yes, Chihiro is actively a character I want to root for. Like, of course I want to root for him, I want to see him put Samura in his place, not kill Samura, but pretty much show him, like, hey, he has a life to live too, and to let him join him on this whole idea of, like, hey, we need to go looking for all the other sword bearers. I understand that, but also, you sort of need to, like, calm down and not just try to go in this massive rate of just only killing yourself and letting everybody else live, pretty much, right? I do like the ideas that we're getting here, but it's just something about, like, I loved all the stuff in the Kabanaki headquarters more. I love seeing both, of course, Hakuri and Uruha sort of acting together. I love seeing Kudo and doing all that stuff. And it's this moment where it's like, okay, I really like how Hakuri's story is being portrayed around Chihiro, but it's really taking this moment to sort of, like, sit down and have to re-understand Chihiro again. Of course, his scarred face from all of his actions there at the Kabuki Play Theater and all of that various stuff, right? And don't get me wrong, like, this was a really cool chapter. I really love the image where, of course, Samura is, like, charging up the blade here in a moment, and, of course, the dual panel, we get to that where Chihiro is also doing it, too. I mean, I'll probably be using those images for the thumbnail of this video. I mean, I think they're just, like, absolutely amazing images, and just, like, the way we get this whole chapter, like, Chihiro gulping, Samura hears this, goes through, uses his blade here in a moment. Chihiro and all of the things in a room fly back, and Chihiro and Tobimune, or Inten and Tobimune, are sort of locked into combat with each other now. I just think it's absolutely amazing. Like, I didn't even mention that we also see Chihiro activate Nishiki here in a moment, too. But it's one of those things where it's like, I'll just really be interested to see where we go next time. Like, I didn't think this chapter's bad, and really don't misconstrue my words as such. I like this chapter, but I just thought some of the other chapters we've gotten before were better. And don't get me wrong, like, this is still like a 8 out of 10 chapter, but it's just not what we have been getting, which also isn't a problem. I love chapters like this where we can slowly build up to have that really awesome moment between, of course, Tobimune and Inten. Of course, the whole idea of, hey, Samura versus Chihiro. It's going to be awesome whenever it happens. I'm also interested to see what happened with Ro whenever he went down. I'm guessing that he went to go get the sheath for Kumeyuri and, like, maybe transport it or, like, send it to somewhere else, so maybe, Hakuri can, like, put it into his storehouse or something. Really don't know, but it's still just, like, cool to see all this stuff happen. And honestly, I really don't have too much else to say about this chapter. The Uruha stuff was also decently interesting. I like seeing, like, him, the little flashback sort of panel we get of him as a youngster along with Samura, and sort of, like, how they probably, like, got to be each other. And, of course, the idea of, like, hey, Uruha brutally followed after Samura to learn everything from him, pretty much. But, hey, I thought this was a fine chapter. I definitely enjoyed it. I'll be interested to see where we go next time in Kagurabachi. But of course, if you guys did enjoy this video, thank you guys so very much for watching it, of course. And I've got plenty of other Kagurabachi videos up on the channel. If I'm not mistaken, this may be the 40th video I have made on Kagurabachi, which, if so, is absolutely crazy, pretty much, right? So, of course, that means there's 39 other videos you guys can go and check out about my thoughts on this great and beautiful series. And yeah, really, with all that out of the way, just thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll catch you again next time for Kagurabachi chapter number 83. Again, this is chapter number 82, titled Inten versus Tobimune. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. This will be Goldplasma 231, signing out.